The plane jerked slightly as it touched down, and Folake's fingers tightened around the armrest before she even realized she was holding her breath. Her heart was racing, not from fear of flying, but from the secret sitting heavy inside her chest. She checked her phone again. No new messages from Emeka. Good. That meant the surprise was still intact. She stood up the moment the seatbelt sign went off, pulling her small carry-on from the overhead compartment with shaking hands. People around her complained and showed impatience, but she didn't hear them. All she could think about was Emeka's face when he would see her standing in his living room, smiling, finally saying the words she had been rehearsing in her head for weeks. "I'm pregnant." She whispered it to herself as she walked out of the plane, the words both terrifying and beautiful. She imagined him laughing in disbelief, pulling her into his arms, lifting her off the ground like he used to do back in school. She imagined him saying, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" And her replying, "Because I wanted to see your face." The taxi ride from the airport felt endless. Abuja passed by in blurs of brown roads and tall buildings, but Folake barely noticed. Her mind drifted, slipping backward into the past, into the beginning of everything. She had met Emeka on her first week in school. She still remembered how lost she had felt that day, standing in the middle of campus with a map she didn't understand and a phone that had no signal. He had stopped in front of her, tall, confident, already moving like someone who belonged there. "Are you new?" he had asked, smiling. She nodded. "Is it that obvious?" He laughed. "Only freshers look this confused." That was how it started. Back then, she had been innocent to the stories whispered among older students. The idea that freshers were temporary, toys to be used and discarded before the next set arrived. She didn't know that some men dated like it was a yearly tradition. She only knew that Emeka listened when she spoke, that he walked her to lectures, that he called every night just to ask, "Have you eaten?" When he asked her out, she said yes without hesitation. What she didn't know was that danger had been sleeping just a few feet away from her bed. Her roommate, a girl a year ahead of her, had noticed Emeka almost immediately, the lingering looks, the unnecessary questions. "So your boyfriend, is he always that nice?" the girl had asked one night, pretending to scroll through her phone. Folake had smiled. "He's just a good person." She didn't see the jealousy hardening behind her roommate's eyes. Emeka saw it, though. He noticed the way the girl leaned too close, laughed too loudly at his jokes, touched his arm for no reason. He noticed, and he said nothing. He told himself it wasn't important. He told himself Folake didn't need to know. When the roommate finally made a move and he shut it down, she pretended nothing had happened. Instead, she turned her attention to Emeka's best friend, his roommate. They dated briefly, loudly, messily. When it ended because the boy treated her like she was replaceable, she came back angrier, sharper, quieter. Still, Emeka and Folake survived everything. They dated through exams, strikes, financial struggles, rumors, and late-night arguments. He introduced her to his mother, who had held Folake's hands warmly and said, "You're welcome in this family." But Folake's own home was different. When her mother found out Emeka was Igbo, her face changed. "Your father will not accept this," she warned softly. "Don't even bring it up." "But Mama, he's a good man," Folake had pleaded. Her mother shook her head. "Some things are not about goodness." Folake carried that fear quietly, loving Emeka fully while knowing that a wall waited ahead. After graduation, life pulled them into different cities. Emeka went for NYSC, working in another state but staying in Abuja. Folake remained in Lagos, building her career, proving herself. They talked every day. They planned. They dreamed. And when her job sent her team to the same state Emeka was working, it felt like fate giving them a gift. Those days together were intense, overdue, emotional. Years of restraint finally collapsed under longing. When it happened, it felt like a promise, not a mistake. Months later, Folake stared at the pregnancy test in her bathroom. Her knees weak as two lines stared back at her. She laughed. Then she cried. Then she sat on the floor and whispered Emeka's name like a prayer. She decided not to tell him over the phone. She wanted to see him. She wanted to surprise him. The taxi slowed in front of his apartment building, snapping her back into the present. Folake paid the driver, her hands trembling as she stepped out. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself, more out of nerves than cold. She texted him earlier that she would arrive by 2 p.m. It was barely 10 a.m. Perfect. The security man recognized her immediately. Oga's wife, he greeted with a grin. She smiled shyly. I'm not his wife. Soon, he said knowingly, opening the gate. Her heart pounded as she climbed the stairs. She reached his door and paused, her fist hovering in the air. She thought of knocking. Then she remembered the spare key he had given her years ago. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door. The door opened. Laughter drifted out from inside. A woman's laughter. Folake froze. Her first thought was that she was imagining things. Her second was that maybe Emeka had a visitor, maybe a colleague. She stepped inside slowly, her heart thudding so loudly it drowned out every other sound. Then she saw her, sitting on Emeka's couch, relaxed, comfortable. Her former roommate looked up, shock flashing across her face before it was replaced by something else, something cold, something almost victorious. Well, the girl said slowly, standing up. Look who finally decided to show up. Folake's world tilted. What are you doing here? She whispered. The girl smiled, a smile that carried 6 years of bitterness. You should be asking yourself that. Folake's knees weakened as the door clicked shut behind her, the weight of the moment crashing down all at once. She couldn't breathe. Folake stood there, her bag slipping from her shoulder and landing softly on the floor, while the woman in front of her straightened her clothes like she owned the space. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until Folake finally found her voice. Where is Emeka? She asked, her throat burning. The girl laughed quietly. At work. Where else would he be? Folake shook her head slowly. Then why are you here? The girl folded her arms, tilting her head. I live here. The words landed like a slap. You're lying, Folake said immediately. This is his house. Yes, the girl replied calmly. Our house. Folake felt something crack inside her chest. Don't do this, she whispered. Don't play with me. The girl stepped closer, her voice dropping. I'm not playing. Didn't you wonder why he never lets you come unannounced? Why he always knows when you're visiting? Why he suddenly became busy every time I was around? Folake's heart pounded violently. Stop, she said. But the girl didn't. You really thought after all these years he would still be faithful to you? Long distance? You? She scoffed. You were convenient in school, but this is real life. Tears burned Folake's eyes. You're my former roommate, she said. You tried to get him before. This is revenge. The girl smiled, slow and deliberate. If that helps you sleep at night. Folake's hands moved instinctively to her stomach, a protective gesture she didn't even realize she was making. How long? She asked, barely audible. The girl shrugged. Long enough? There was a pause. Then the girl added softly, cruelly, He said you were too emotional, that you were stuck in the past. That was the moment something inside Folake went quiet. She looked around the living room, his shoes by the door, a female scarf on the armrest, 2 toothbrushes visible through the open bathroom door, details she never wanted to notice but now couldn't unsee. I came to tell him something, Folake said, her voice hollow. The girl raised an eyebrow. Oh? Let me guess. You were hoping he'd marry you? Folake swallowed hard. For a second, she almost spoke, almost said the truth, almost said she was carrying his child. But she didn't. Instead, she nodded once. Yes, the girl laughed again. Then you should save your breath. He doesn't want complications. That word echoed in Folake's head as she bent down, picked up her bag, and walked toward the door. Wait, the girl called, suddenly nervous. You're not even going to talk to him? Folake turned, her eyes empty. No. You're just going to leave? Yes. And if he asks? Folake paused. Tell him I saw enough. She stepped out and closed the door gently behind her. The moment she reached the staircase, her legs gave way. She gripped the railing, fighting the urge to scream. Instead, tears streamed silently down her face as she descended each step, each one feeling like a farewell to the life she thought she had. By the time she reached the gate, she had already booked the next flight back to Lagos. When she arrived home, her mother knew something was wrong before Folake said a word. You look like someone died, her mother said quietly. Folake collapsed into her arms. It's over, she sobbed. Everything is over. Between broken sentences and shaking breaths, she told her mother everything. The visit, the girl, the lies, the house. Her mother's face hardened as she listened. When her father heard, the house shook with his anger. I warned you, he shouted. I told you this would happen. Now look at you. Folake didn't respond. She just sat there, numb, her hands resting on her stomach. That evening, Emeka returned home. He noticed it immediately. The air felt different. The door was unlocked. There was a faint scent he recognized instantly. Folake? He called, confused. No answer. He walked into the living room and froze. Her bag was gone, but her scarf lay forgotten on the couch. His phone buzzed. A message notification he hadn't seen earlier. I'm coming to Abuja today, 2 p.m. His heart dropped. He called her immediately. No answer. He called again. Voicemail. Folake, please, he said when it finally rang. Pick up. What's going on? Nothing. He tried again. 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 Panic crept in as he realized the truth. She had been here. Without thinking, he grabbed his keys, booked the next flight to Lagos, and rushed out. By the time he arrived at her parents' house, it was already too late. Her father refused to let him in. She doesn't want to see you, her mother said quietly through the gate. Please, Emeka begged. There's a misunderstanding, I swear. Go, her father interrupted. If you come back here again, you'll regret it. Emeka stood there long after the gate closed, his chest tight, his phone heavy in his hand. He didn't know that Folake was watching from her bedroom window, tears streaming down her face as she turned away. Days later, she boarded another plane. This time, she didn't leave a message. She left the country. She chose silence. She chose distance. She chose to protect herself and the child growing inside her from a love that had shattered her completely. 6 years passed, and fate waited patiently, because someday, in a quiet elevator, with no warning and no escape, Folake would come face to face with the man who broke her heart, and the past she ran from would finally stand in front of her.